And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily Zencast, with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.
Hello and namaste. Welcome to another episode of the Almost Daily Zencast, which is of course the home of Good Morning Drumtopia, as well as breaking news, and one of my favorites, Late Night Paranoid Thoughts with Mr. Zeppo. It is I, your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And folks, I just had one of those moments. Literally. In a what the hell is going on, what the actual fuck kind of way. The world is a mysterious place. A mysterious place that works in mysterious ways. And depending on your take, your personal perspective, your chosen paradigm, the world either leaves plenty of wiggle room for strange synchronicities, magical coincidences, and even mind-melting, mind-blowingly weird moments. I just had one of those moments. I shit you not, folks. I'm setting aside everything else that I was working on to just share this moment with you. I'm actually kind of surprised I didn't do it last night. But it was the end of the night, and I was no longer in a proper state to try and, get my mouth to follow along with what my brain was saying. But I digress. That's neither here nor there. Here's what happened. Here's what's weird. Let me give you some context. Anybody who's ever worked with me creatively, especially in theater, in real life, they wouldn't be surprised should I or anyone else were to apply the word or descriptor meta to the way I operate, sort of the way I think. In fact, in a conversation not too long ago, someone said, "Wow, that's so crazy meta." Someone complimented me on how meta my proposed conspiracy theory about all conspiracy theories is, and that it was a bit mind-melty for them. It had never occurred to them, as I think it has never occurred to many people who are fans of or even card-carrying members of the conspiracy theory community. But it's never occurred to them that, you can get self-referential and meta with the whole phenomena and argue that the content that is being delivered through that funnel is itself like psyop conspiracy content, right? But I digress. Setting that and everything else aside, I am someone who self-identifies as an appreciator of meta theatrical art, meta literary art, meta cinematic art. I love it when you get to a mindfucky place. For example, it doesn't have to be convoluted mindfucky, I just like it when the mindfuck is probably a distracting keyword. The mindfuck originates from the sort of mild cognitive dissonance about like adapting or expanding or having to stretch open our comprehension of our own comprehension of our own comprehending of what we understand and what we have come to comprehend, right? Like, if you can get the mind to see its own parallax, like parallel set of mirrors a little bit, it feels tingly and makes you go, what? And that's, I think, what, in practical terms, meta-theatrical, meta-magical kind of stuff does for human beings. It kind of helps us to feel the echo chamber of observer and projector and observership and projectorship a little bit in some either direct way or in some indirect way. One of my favorite meta moments I was about to start saying, and then I trailed off, and I'll come back full circle to my real life thing that I'm trying to tell you. But one of my all-time favorite, 11:11 a.m. Greetings, listeners and fans. It is Saturday, May 2nd, 11:11 a.m. And by the way, before I get too many sidebars into oblivion of sidebarring myself, I want to put a special note here that's actually very relevant to all of this, but you'll see in a moment. But I want to apologize to everybody on my Facebook page, including some personal friends of mine whose birthdays have hit in recent days, and I've missed them. And I have not posted my usual birthday video of happy birthday greetingsness. There's a reason. Okay, now stick with me. My story gets weirder. We're going to come back to that, I swear. And it's going to connect to this weird meta moment that I'm telling you about now from a TV show, or from a movie rather, and in terms of how it works, and a weird real life, just what the fuck, metacognitive, like questioning the universe moments in a hot minute. Oh, and I'm such a numbskull. Oh, it's probably not up online yet. I wish I'd caught audio tape of this and ripped it illegally from the television, or illegally, without technically asking for permission. Just for this one bit, because I know that I won't have the wording right. But this will eventually be on, this moment that messed with my head will eventually be on the interwebs, on this show's social media platform. But I digress. To everybody whose birthdays I missed, I apologize. There's a couple of really specific reasons, and I'm going to get you. I'm going to hit you back. And if I, for some reason, leave you off this year, right, like if your birthday was like 4 days ago and I can't find you anymore because the birthday list only goes back so far in recent birthdays, I'll get you come around next year. Hang tight. But trust me, I hope, knock on wood, and on my magic, it's all worth it, and you'll see why in a hot minute. But okay, so, the birthday thing, pinned it up on the wall. My favorite cinematic meta theatrical moment is the kicker at the end of Box Trolls. If you've never seen Box Trolls, go watch it, go rent it. It's cute and adorable. And stay through to the end of the credits and watch the bit at the end, a kicker. Industry term, for reals. It's when you add a little beat or a scene or an Easter egg or in the industry we're like, we call that the kicker. And in Box Trolls, I want to explain it, but I don't want to explain it. Let's just say it's heavily meta, right? Especially if it really impacts you if you can connect to your inner child, if you can connect to that sense of awe at the magic of cinema. A lot of people watch movies in a very jaded sort of like, meh, whatever, it's just movies. But if you can get into that like sense of wonder about it, and then you really let it hit you in terms of like what it kind of communicates without words as a set of imagery, like pay attention to the kicker and what you can interpret out of it. Like sit with it, watch it a few times, think about it, put it away, come back to it. I don't want to spoiler it now, but I'm going to do a whole episode about it, I hope. Put a pin in this, big red pin on the things we're going to do an episode about for versions 3.0 and up. I always giggle at myself when I talk about that because for way too long I hadn't even... there's been no evidence that I've done any of that. And I'm now about to because I'm jazzed and I'm finally feeling connected to stuff and getting some muse-like activities and some inspirations and shit. Thank you, Hard Knock Life, for having kicked me to the curb a few times to get me ready to be humble enough to be receptive. Okay, digressing. That moment at the end of Box Trolls is categorically meta. It's meta-cinematic. And if you look at it as allegory, as symbolism, as something more than the event itself that applies to you, your life, your relationship to the universe. Okay, so philosophically speaking, that's a level that I'm very concerned with, right? The question and the exploration in art, of our relationship to the universe. And I think a lot of people think that's just a dead end or some kind of, collection of hippie new age mumbo jumbo that doesn't go anywhere and doesn't make any fucking sense. I totally forgot what picture I picked for today. That's right, totally. I'm trying to go meta. I picked, and then there's a reason why I was wondering about the picture I picked for today's cover. I picked an unusual one. We'll come back to that in just a hot second. When it comes to myself personally, for those of you who may or may not be aware, I have an unusual, chosen philosophical self-identification for how I think I relate to the universe, how I almost choose to believe that I relate to the universe. And I choose, and I've constructed for myself, am experimentally exploring the process of developing a postmodern, hopefully collaboratively developed, that means you, meta theory about our experience here. Right? That's a theory that is larger than just the plain old boring mundane Newtonian physics is it materialism. Because, no offense, but anybody who's anybody and who's done a little bit of living and checking things out knows that can't be the end all be all of everything. It just can't. Materialism? It can't be the whole of it and no more. That's not possible, if I may say so personally, directly, and in all honesty, right? I believe that. Sit with that for just a second. Now, for some people, that's a very difficult thought. It challenges the brain, but. Set all that aside, right? I'm telling you what I am experienced and why yesterday was a mind-fucking moment. You really had to get into some context. I'm a person who believes in calling, right? There is a calling in life. There's maybe not so much a goal or an objective or a purpose, but most definitely a calling. Something that we as individuals... we as pair-bonded life partners, we as life enterprises, groups of people doing something together, we can consider our families like little tribes. Obviously, there's all kinds of tribalist thinking about, and I don't mean it in the toxic way, in the us versus them down to the blood versus everybody else, right? Because that's what's wrong with the world. Let's just be blunt. Let's put it. That's not what's wrong with the world. That is a high-level order core symptomology that is clarifying for us that there is something massively wrong with the world. This tribalism to the point of blood before anything else. And we're all blood, yo. Not only are we all genetically 99.99999 with 1,000 nines identical in terms of our genomic comparison, human being to human being across the entire species. But when you really think about it, oh, and this is all making so many interconnections. When you really think about it, all of life is, a spirally web of interconnected, interrelated family. But let's get to the meta thing. I'm a person who not only believes or has chosen to rationally accept and conclude for myself certain things to be true that include the unity of consciousness model. In other words, that at the center of my brain, that which I consider my awareness, my focal point of absorbing things, the part of me that is the watcher, the consumer, the taker in of all information, data, sound, sensation, etc., that part of me does not originate in this shell, in this talking, meat and blood and bone spacesuit, but rather it originates in a deeper place of an otherly kind of locality, a non-local origin that is simultaneously dispersed and distributed and also kind of all unified at once. Sounds crazy at first blush, but once you get to a certain level of comprehending reality as it actually seems to operate through, the sheer brute force will of itself, you come to understand that dualities, that some things that we consider false dichotomies or dichotomous oppositions or, opposing forces are actually, I hate it when that happens, are actually intertwined or conjoined twins. The simplest and also sort of most elusive example is up and down. You cannot separate up from down. You can fall down and not be able to go up. That's a different matter, though. That's about perceived motion, right? And locality within this finite material space. But in terms of an allegorical representation of how the universe works, can you take the object identified as up and separate it from the object identified as down? No. Well, there's a lot of logical flaws there. One would say up and down are not objects, right? But we speak of them as if they were. But they're directions. Okay, well, can you separate the direction from the other? No, of course not. They define each other, okay? So I think that that's real and relevant on multiple levels, including levels that are beyond our current modality of perception. Given all that, and in the middle of my theory, I believe that the universe works in mysterious ways, and that you and I are not that much different from that which is the universe, although in our phenomenological experiencing of our lives, we feel very alone, very separate, very trapped inside this skull, very different from that which is the universe. But indeed, ultimately, we are one and the same. Just, deeply involved in this Maya or fractal holographic illusion or pretend game of creating this reality to be here now. And that's really important for a bunch of different reasons, which we'll get into in a bunch of different segments and or episodes over time. So make sure you go all the way back to the beginning, if you haven't yet, and visit some of those episodes, because there's stuff that connects all throughout here. But let's get to the point. The challenge, the game, the fun is figuring out the calling, figuring out what you're meant to do, and what you're meant to do is something that you chose, something you crafted for yourself, in theory, according to this thesis that I'm calling together many different theories together. And you chose it because, well, you are inseparable from the rest of it, right? You're just pretending at being separate to have this experience. Okay, so that was a long explanation, but there is the salient points to my meta theory that are relevant in this moment now to this crazy fucking thing that happened to me yesterday. I've been sort of coping with multiple episodes of being forced by the universe to contend with limitations. If you think you're getting a little a little cabin feverish and feeling cooped up because you've been under stay-at-home guidelines for 30, 40, 50 days or whatever it is. I mean, we've been at this for less than a year, right? We haven't even really hit summer yet, although it's starting to get fucking hot out here in SoCal. And it's a bit soon for that, so that means we're either going to have a really weird fucking rainy, messed up cold summer, or a really, like, Death Valley times 10, like, frying pan into the fire kind of summer, which will suck. I'm hoping for the rainy, wet, Mexican kind of like, what the fuck, it's Mexico City down here all of a sudden, tropical, because we can get like that sometimes if all the conditions line up right, but I'm not a betting man. I'm not trying to lay out odds. Needless to say, it has been a relatively short time, no matter how long and torturous it may have felt. And for context, I've been going through waves of this in my own personal life for various reasons, sometimes of my own making. For example, not too long ago, about 3 years ago or so, and that sounds like forever ago, but this is all one long, blurred together period of time. I went through a phase where I was unable to drive and couldn't go to work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've talked about it on the show before, and it's not something I enjoy bringing up because it brings some shame. But you know, I am a real human being, really trapped here in this reality, contending with all the things that everyone's contending with. And for all the reasons that a person can find themselves in a situation, I got myself a DUI, the second one in my adult life. And they weren't like back to back or anything, but the previous one had been about 10 years earlier. So, and in between, you know, my life had been all kinds of different things. Needless to say, I don't drink very much anymore. But my point is, I've been feeling this progression. For a while there, the joke was, I literally was living through some kind of country song where I lost my dog, I lost my car, my girlfriend left me, my life was rock bottom, apparently. Or at least the closest to rock bottom I've ever experienced. And I'll be the first to say I have been blessed with good fortune and things that I couldn't have asked for to work out better, even when they were stressful or confusing or even, you know, not that great or whatever. And some people might even say that I lived a charmed life. I wouldn't go so far as to say that because I don't have a giant media enterprise at my disposal to create the kind of engaging counter-narrative, anti-establishment, spiritual revolutionary content that I'd like to create with the force I'd like to create it with. But that's a big, giant red pin at the very top of the slightly organized but mostly disorganized collection of pins on the giant corkboard wall in my mind. This podcast has been part of that development, right? I started the podcast because I had time on my hands, and I'd become engaged in lots of social public discourse about current events. And I was like, you know what? I've always been a chatty type, and since the very tender age of like 7 or 8, I'd imagined being on the radio and being a DJ. And I'm like, now the universe has suddenly provided for me all the tools necessary to kind of play at it from home. And needless to say, it's been a very interesting journey from then until now. From the very beginning, and I shit you not, hand on the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, the AA big book, whatever book you want me to swear on, from the very beginning, the vision for this project had been kind of in my brand, in my style, in the collaborative theater artists group studio vein of doing things. I'd imagined like, I'd love to do like a movie about characters revolving around this character without showing that much of the show, but with the punchy comedy of getting to hear a few of my most salient, most meaningful, most like kapow statements about the universe and our relationship to it. That's part of the purpose, right? If I can be accused of having an agenda, which I'm sure if the show continues to grow in its audience acceptance and or the audience for this show has been growing steadily, apparently. And for that, I say welcome, thank you, and namaste. But so if it ever gets that critical mass that there's, conspiracy theories about my show, oh, that'll be the day, right? Come full circle and have like a conspiracy theory about me and who I am and whatever. Hopefully it will be acknowledged that my agenda is to get you, if I have an agenda, which I don't really think I do, I want to express myself. Is that a horrible agenda? Well, okay, then I'm guilty of that. But, a person can have an agenda, it not be a horrible, evil, nefarious, take over the world kind of Pinky in the Brain mastermind plot to destroy everybody, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that. The agenda can just be the list of items of things that are going to happen at a given time, on a given day, for a given reason. That's it. Doesn't have to be evil. With this show, one of the things I intend to do is prompt and question and toy with the very idea of publicly acceptable, normal questioning of reality as we've come to understand it, beyond the typical tread lines that we already question, right? Because there's plenty of that on social media. I want to push it a little bit further. I want to take it up a notch. Bam! I want to bam! Up a notch. Anybody gets that reference? It's one of the original celebrity chef personalities from back in the heydays of reality TV that... Is it Emerald? I think it was Emerald. Bam! Up a notch. And I totally have the Futurama reference conflated, in which he's carrying around some sort of like seasoning sausage weasel that he's got to like tweak the taste. Is it Futurama or is it not Family Guy? Anyways, I've always loved cartoons, by the way, especially cartoons made for non-youth audiences. Like Adult Swim from Cartoon Network, etc. One of my inspirations for wanting to write books, which I hope one day to sell and turn into comic books and turn into movies, is the Venture Brothers, right? I think anybody who's familiar with that show will understand that there's something snarky going on, or even more pop culture trendy Archer. There's something snarky going on when we can do, as artists, things that would be cost prohibitive in real life for like a live action thing, unless you have to turn to, like CGI, and that's all the rage now. And then that's just sort of like, for me personally, talent, skill set, learning curve, cost prohibitive. But from the very beginning of me launching this show, I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if I did this show in real life, but it was like a cartoon? In other words, there was some stock footage of me that I just shot, and then occasionally I would interview myself, and I could have cartoon versions of me, and then mostly do it in cartoon form, because I don't like getting up and doing hair and makeup every day. Sidebar, there's a lot of memes of like what coronavirus has really taught us. And let me tell you, what something else coronavirus has really taught us? Who out there in the world is really on point at looking professional and camera ready from home? Now, either they all are bending the guidelines and having, film crews and makeup crews and hairdressers and blah, blah, blah at their house for all these, live from home shots that everyone's doing. And I wouldn't be surprised, right? If plenty of people did that. But that's a sidebar. It's ridiculous. I personally, from long before this, right? For those of you who have been fans for a very long time, you'll know that on my very original YouTube channel, I do indeed have two, for some reason. I have two different Gmails associated with my brand, and thus the capacity vis-a-vis YouTube's platform to have two distinct YouTube channels. The Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, which is attached to the public email, theincorrigiblemrzeppo@gmail.com, is where this podcast auto-shares straight from Sprecher. Now, I will probably figure out a way to integrate or merge those two channels at some point. I think there is such a way to do that. But I still apparently also can post things directly to just, the word just is not part of the title, but exclusively, quote, Mr. Zeppo, which is attached to a different email. And there, if you dig deep, if I'm not an idiot and haven't taken them down, there should still reside the very original sort of like cheesy, shot in my living room attempts at creating what I hoped would be an easy to produce, almost daily video talk show. And I even was trying to do a thing with like live slides behind me. And bro, let me tell you, that was so much work. It took me like 3 weeks to make 2 episodes. Right? And part of it was like obviously learning curve. I'd never really done that before. Not in a meaningful way. Although I collaborated with other people's video projects and done some other student film work and stuff like that, and have edited film before, and I've edited audio before. I've never done it all together all at once for a show that I sat in the chair and talked for, while also running the camera and creating whatever other additional content was exhausting. So then I thought, I gotta do it in such a way that's a little bit easier. And I don't get it. And I was like, you know what? The simplest thing to do is just cut it from a video format to an audio format. And then it hit me like, and then if I ever wanted to, I can go back and shoot like real life video to reintroduce segments and do cartoon segments and do a hybrid show. Do a cartoon, real life hybrid show using the core audio content of what, you know, the podcast as radio style, talk show style live thing has already been, right? So 3 years ago, had that vision, had that thought. It also included guests and a permanent co-host or two that would come hang out, you know, someone to come out on a Tuesday and record 3 or 4 episodes, someone to come out and visit on a Wednesday and record 3 or 4 episodes. And I thought, I've got a couple friends, I'll easily be able to talk. Never did. Couldn't ever talk anybody into actually sitting around with me like this, except for the people I've interviewed in, conversations with segments. And I had originally wanted to. I never pitched this hardcore at my storefront theater, not storefront theater. I could have pitched this at any of the storefront theaters that I have, history with or just connections to. But I wanted to give first right of refusal to my day job theater. Be like, you guys, I think it doesn't have to be co-branded. I can totally just be a different name. I can make up a character for myself, or I can just be the quiet, the nameless intro voice or whatever. I can just be the engineer. But I want to produce and create a chit-chat recorded in front of a live theater studio audience talk show about local theater. I'm going to do it here, and I'm going to do it in, our black box on downtime. We'll just schedule it out on, throughout the year when it's going to not be used, and it's just sitting there empty for days and days. And we just invite a bunch of people, and it's pay what you can, give donations, just to kind of help the project, defray costs, and we just invite, 10, 20, 30, 40 people. I think our black box at the store at the day job theater only seats like 99. I don't remember. I have to look that up. But it's a reasonably sized. And then we just get a couple of like in-house regulars to come in and be correspondents, and you model it after a late night talk show, But it's exclusively about really talking about theater and and you just patch in a couple of decent, like good quality mics, and then run it all to my to a box that pre-mixes it and pumps it into whatever device I bring to like broadcast it, and then just like, let me use the Wi-Fi here and we'll broadcast it live. It's about ready to go. Boom. And it'll be like so minimum effort, low impact, and it would generate such awesome audience awareness. So if anybody from work is listening, it's a great idea. You just get get a couple of our regular. I digress. I would love to do that show. Tune in for part 2